Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. If you guys are new here, my name is Julia, and I'm assuming if you're clicking on today's video, you are probably interested in the field of radiography. So recently, almost a month ago, I just graduated from my program. I was in a 2-year Associates in Applied Science program, so I asked for you guys to ask me some questions over on my YouTube community page. In the past, I have done a couple videos talking about my program and talking about the requirements that were needed for my program, so I'll kind of just briefly run over that because I don't want to be too repetitive in this video, but I know that this is going to generate a few new people coming in, so if you are new here, I do have other videos that I have made in the past, so I'll link those down below if I don't happen to answer any of your questions that you may have. One video in particular that I filmed was all about the application process, what classes I took, things like that. Briefly, I'll talk about my program. Like I said, I just graduated a month ago, and I graduated from an Associates in Applied Science program, so that is at a community college. So there are different options for radiography programs. However, I chose to do the community college route. Everyone's gonna have their own reasoning to this, so this is just my own opinion, but I personally wanted to attend a community college because number one, it was almost 5 times cheaper for me to go to a community college versus a university, and it would have taken me 3 more years to finish that program, and that was even if I got in. Both bachelor's and associate's degree programs are gonna be very competitive regardless, so just keep that in mind if you're going to be pursuing either or. I did go to a university to take some prerequisites, but once I realized how much less money it was going to be to attend the community college, I decided to go that route. So everyone always asks me, how do I apply? How do I do this? What classes do I need? That's gonna depend entirely on what school you go to, where you're located. Rather than asking me, because I only know what my own program required, I would recommend talking to your own academic advisor. That's what they're there for. They know all the requirements, and they'll sit down with you and show you kind of a layout of everything that you'll have to take in order to apply. The last video that I uploaded like this kind of generated a lot of arguments in the comment section, so I had to kind of moderate those just to keep the peace, I guess. But taking prerequisites at a community college does not include your time in the actual program. So the amount of time that you take to do all of your prerequisites is going to depend for every single person, and it's also going to be different for every single year because certain classes are only available in certain semesters. So for me personally, the radiology intro class was only available in the fall, so you could either take that once you got into the program. The amount of time it takes for you to get all of your prerequisites done is going to depend on each person. I had someone arguing that they thought that whole process was stupid, and unfortunately I don't pick the rules, but that's just how it goes. So for me personally, I took all my prerequisites at a university, and then I had to take a couple at my community college that were required for that specific college. Anyway, so with prereqs, I would recommend talking to your advisor and figuring it out that way, because there's no way for me to know what every single college in the United States requires. So now, once you are going to be applying to your program, the guidelines will be different for every single program. Some require interviews, some require just grades, and they go based off of a GPA system. Our program only had a GPA system, so if you had an A in your prerequisite class, that would give you 3 points. If you had a B, it would give you 2, and if you had a C, it would give you 1. So it was all based on a point system, and it took all of those required prereq classes, and you would get in based on how many points you had. Everyone's thoughts are going to differ on that. I personally would have liked to have an interview because I think certain people don't really know what they're getting themselves into when it comes to the program, so I personally would have kind of wanted an interview, but just depends on what school you go to. Some of you may have clicked on this video for interview advice, but unfortunately I don't have any advice for that. I will link to radiology students that I personally am friends with below in the description box. I'm not sure if their program had an interview process, but if they did, I encourage asking them possibly, but Google is your best friend for anything. Try Googling it first. I think I did come across a radiology interview question on one of the colleges, so I'm sure Google will have it if you search it. So now once you get into your program is going to be set entirely by your college. So all the classes you take and when you take them are going to be set by them. Since it is confined to 21 months, at least mine was, they set what classes you take in the semesters. And for my program personally, we had clinical from start to finish. So our very second week in the program, we started clinical, and I personally really liked that because it was a gradual learning process for clinical. And with surgery, like I was able to go into surgery for the full 21 months of my program, and I was able to experience that. With all of this that I mentioned, just keep in mind that every single program is different. So yours may be entirely different from mine. So it's just my own experience. That's what this video is just talking about my experience and my own personal experiences in the radiology program. It's not like a set guideline of what to follow. So that's all I had to talk about for the program application and stuff, and kind of the information about what I did for my program. My program was not a modality based program. I know some of them you can also cross train into CT or MRI. Mine was not that way, probably due to the fact that it is an associate's program, but I'm not really sure on that. Mine personally did not, so I don't know anything about that. I have about 50 questions on here, so we're gonna get started. First question, are you interested in getting your bachelor's, and do you ever feel overwhelmed / burnt out? Plus how to recover from that and keep the motivation going with work now and when you were in school. Okay, that's a lot of questions. Number one, are you interested in getting your bachelor's? No, I am not. Personally, in my state, you get paid the exact same if you have your bachelor's or if you have your associate's degree, and you're gonna be getting paid the same wage as an x-ray tech. In my state, at least. I'm not gonna speak for all states because I don't know that, but from my own experience, that's what it is. I don't ever plan to manage a department either. It's just not something that ever interests me, so I don't think I intend to ever go back to school for that. As for feeling overwhelmed and burnt out, absolutely. I think if you don't get overwhelmed and burnt out in this program, I would love to know your secrets. It's a lot to learn in a short amount of time, and burnout likely is going to happen, and I don't mean to scare you with that, but I definitely had times where I was like, what did I get myself into? With that, you just have to keep going. You have to keep pushing through it. There's light at the end of the tunnel. Just keep reminding yourself that. At the start of my program, I was like, oh my gosh, 2 years is a very long time, or just a little bit under 2 years, and here we are, done. It feels like that was last week that I just started the program. So, but keeping motivated, I think watching YouTube for me was a big way to stay motivated, because although I wasn't watching other x-ray students, I was watching other students and just seeing them be productive with their lives. That really helped me to stay motivated. And I think just remembering to take time for yourself, even if it is just 20 minutes to take a hot shower and just do some self-care, I think that's really important. I would love to know about your clinical experience altogether. How did you prepare, and things you liked and disliked about clinicals, how you overcame nerves with patient interaction. Obviously, due to HIPAA, I can't share patient stories and patient experiences and stuff like that. That's just not cool. So my clinical experience altogether was great. Like I said, we went to clinical for the whole duration of the program, which I really liked. Preparing for clinicals, I think no one ever is probably prepared. It's a scary unknown, especially if you've never been in a hospital. Like if you worked in a hospital, at least you know kind of what the environment and the flow kind of looks like, for the most part, I guess. But for a lot of people, I personally had never worked in a hospital. So my very first clinical rotation, the second week of the program, was at a big hospital, and the first day flies by and you're just learning so much in that first day. So just remember, you're not in that boat alone. You likely have other people with you. I know some of our clinical sites had just one student there. The first one I went to had 5 students. Things that I disliked and liked, there really wasn't anything that I disliked. I think sometimes people can be a little hard on students and they forget that we're learning and that they were in our shoes at one point too. So I think if you're encountering a tech that is looking over you that isn't very nice, just remember that they could be going through something in their life and that you won't be around them forever. So as for overcoming nerves with patient interaction, I never really had nerves with that. So I don't really have any tips for that, but I think practice helps. If you don't have like a set routine down when you go into a patient room or when you start an exam, I would recommend kind of practicing that with either like a friend or a family member, or even in the mirror. What was the most difficult part for you? If you could give your past self advice, what would you say? Don't be so hard on yourself. You're gonna have repeat images. You're gonna have less than optimum images, and you're gonna have people get mad at you. You're gonna have doctors and nurses and other x-ray techs get mad at you. Sometimes you just have to swallow your pride and remember you're just a student and you're just learning. So don't be so hard on yourself is what I would tell myself. Are you interested in going into a different modality? Yes, I would like to go into CT or MRI. Now that I'm working at the clinic and I have experience with phlebotomy, it kind of gives me a little bit of an idea of what it would be like to start an IV. So at least I have kind of that experience a little bit, so I would know what it would be like in CT. So I would definitely be interested in CT or MRI. Next question, how did you figure out technique? So technique is kind of something that is hard to understand, and it took me a while to even get the basis of it. Our positioning instructor was very strict with us that we learn technique, and it was kind of hard to fluctuate from site to site because every single equipment is going to differ a little bit. And I mean, they're going to be kind of the same, but you're never going to have your technique perfect down pat because every single patient is going to be different, which is going to pull your S number a little bit differently. So with every single equipment, you should have a technique chart in every single room, and on every single portable there legally has to be a technique chart. So having that to reference on, and then remembering like your 15% rule and the 10 centimeter rule, things like that. It just takes a while to really make it click. And I think even right now I'm still learning technique, but just reference your technique charts in the room and try to keep those average ranges in mind. A lot of the techs would make the students manually set the technique, and then they would check it obviously before exposure. So just don't be hard on yourself when it comes to learning technique, because it is definitely something that takes a while. Next question, I'd love to hear about your best patient care advice. I'm a junior in a nuke med program and we are about to start clinicals. That's really cool. I got to shadow in nuke med and it was really interesting. Treat your patients with care. I think sometimes people can feel rushed in x-ray, especially when there's a pileup of patients, the ortho light is on, and a stack of patients that are waiting for you. But I just think it's important to remember that your patient in that moment is the most important priority to you at that time. I like to make small talk with my patients, at least ask them, how's the weather outside? At least it's less awkward than just standing there and not speaking to them. So treat them with respect and don't use big medical terminology. That's a huge thing. Don't use medical terminology that a regular person on the street that isn't involved with medical would understand. Just try to use layman's terms, as one of my instructors would say. I started my radiology program in the fall and I was wondering how the workload is. I'm also very scared about clinicals, so how was your clinical experience? My clinical experience was good, like I mentioned. There was a couple times where techs weren't very nice, but that's gonna happen. The workload is definitely, it can be a lot, especially your first year. You're learning all of the positioning and it can just be like, oh my gosh, like it's overwhelming. Just give yourself time and be patient with yourself. Certain things come easier to others, and don't compare yourself to another student that is doing better than you or that you feel is doing better than you, because you never know. One person could be great at the clinical experience but could be terrible on pen and paper, or vice versa. The workload definitely can be a lot, but just try to stay organized. I personally like to use a planner. I talk about that all the time. Like I said, give yourself time to relax. I always made myself go to bed and get at least 7 hours of sleep because no one likes anyone that's crabby. I've gotten a lot of these questions. How did you deal with nerves and anxiety when performing exams for the first time on patients? What helped you with that? And then how did you deal with Roux Technologists as a student? So with nerves and anxiety, I actually had an Apple Watch when I first started the program, and I noticed that my heart rate was like extremely high when I was just sitting. Like it would be 105 to 115, just sitting or just standing in place, not moving. I had just a normal annual exam with my doctor, and she attributed it to anxiety. So I decided to not go on medication for it or anything, and she put a Holter monitor on me and everything. She just attributed it to anxiety, and with time it kind of just went away on its own, but it definitely is an anxiety inducing experience when you first start. There are certain triggers that can heighten your heart rate, like caffeine and stuff. So just try to notice those triggers if you do have them, and just know that it will get better with time. And then how did you deal with Roux Technologists? There was a few times when people were just a little snippy or said things under their breath, but honestly, I just kind of brushed it off and just remember that you're only there for a short bit of time, and hopefully you get to rotate to a different facility. But if not, and they keep repeating it, I guess if it's bad enough where you need to talk to someone about it, I would, because that's not okay. What rotation was your favorite and least favorite? OR, emergency department, fluoro, peds. My favorite rotation was probably just being in orthopedics because there was a lot of variety and it was always fast paced, and I feel like the days went by really quickly, and I didn't really have like a least favorite. Of course, like C-arm is always really intimidating, just being in surgery in general. Learning a C-arm is not the easiest thing. Like, I definitely struggled learning the C-arm when it came to like lateral C-spine surgeries. Again, with time, things become easier. But another question, I just got accepted into my program. Congratulations. I am so excited. I guess my question is, what is the biggest thing you would recommend to new students? And also, what was the most challenging part of the program for you? I've kind of said all of this before, but don't be hard on yourself. Remember that you're learning something completely foreign and brand new. With positioning, certain things can be easier for people, and I personally really liked my positioning classes. I know that there were other people that absolutely hated them. Also, your med term is super important, and it's going to help you tremendously in your positioning classes and your positioning tests as well as boards. And yeah, I would say med terminology is super important, so I would definitely brush up on that if you haven't taken it in a while. And then the most challenging part of the program for me was definitely physics. Physics took me the full 2 years to really understand, and I'm still learning to understand it, but everything's starting to really make sense, and I don't think it really started to make sense until about April. Someone asked, how did you balance everything? Honestly, it's hard, but like I said, using a planner, using Google Calendar, writing things down was really helpful for me. I'm such a type A person, so that stuff really helped me, but that may not help you guys. But honestly, it's hard, and I worked an hour away in my hometown, so I was driving and commuting a lot. Like, I would drive up to 10 hours some weeks and probably more. So it got to be really hard on my mental health, but I made it through, so that's the most important part. Is taking chemistry helpful before starting a radiography program? What about physics? You likely will have to take chemistry in order to apply. Like, that was one of my prereqs, but it is not included in the program hardly at all. Like, it's just not. And physics, in the program you take radiographic physics, so it's pertinent to radiography, but normal physics I have never taken, so I don't know how much that would help you. I guess I'm not the best at answering that question. What surprised you most about the program? Just the variety of things that you do in x-ray. We go do portables in the ER, we take patients from the ER, we have orthopedic clinics that we take outpatients from, we have upstairs in like inpatient rooms. We help with speech, swallowing studies like with C-arms or in fluoro. We have fluoroscopy, which is live x-ray, so you do barium studies like a barium enema. Surgery, like you go into surgery cases, so you're literally everywhere. Pain injections, myelograms. You do so much in x-ray, and I think I was really surprised at the variety of things that you do. And as an x-ray tech, like, you do all of those things if you work at a hospital, so at least where I'm from. So I don't know with bigger hospitals if they like assign certain people to do those things. I'm not really sure. How does becoming certified across different states work? Does passing the ARRT boards allow you to practice in any state in the US, or does that accreditation have anything to do with that? So Google will be your best friend with answering these questions, because I don't know everything about every state. So with North Dakota, we have a temporary license. That's why I can work right now without having my boards. North Dakota has a temporary license. I can apply for 6 months and have my temporary license and work as an x-ray tech while I am waiting to take boards. I have my board scheduled for the beginning of July, so that is why I'm able to work. Every single state's different. I don't know every single state's licensure regulations, but with North Dakota, you have to pass your boards and you also have to have a license in North Dakota. So I'm pretty sure, I don't think Minnesota has that. So I think you just have to have your ARRT registration. So I would recommend Googling it because I don't know all of that. How did you deal with the pressure/stress of getting all your practice x-rays to be book perfect? Did you experience anxiety at all? Like I said, just don't be so hard on yourself. Nothing is ever going to be perfect. You'll have some that are going to be like, wow, that's beautiful, but unfortunately, every patient cannot walk and talk and do everything that you need them to do, and that's where critical thinking comes into play. As long as your images have all of the correct anatomy and are diagnostic for the radiologist to read, that's kind of all you can do at that point. Is the program extremely time-consuming, and would you consider it to be difficult? My boyfriend is currently looking for a career path to take, and he has mentioned radiology to me a couple of times. I feel like this is something that he could do, but he hasn't always been the most motivated as a student. Would you say a radiology program is super intense. Well, you don't have a say in whether or not you want to go to clinical. Like, you have to go. It's like a job. You only get so much time off. It's called CTO. So we got 40 hours of CTO per year. So we had 80 hours of CTO in total, and that's for doctor's appointments, or if in the case you were to need a sick day, you would take CTO. But yeah, you don't get to choose whether or not you want to go to clinical. And like I said earlier, they do choose your classes for you, and they have your program set out for you. So you take all the classes when they say you do. So unfortunately, you have to work things into your program schedule. Like, you can't work your program schedule around things, if that makes sense. I personally think it's time consuming because you don't have a say in the things that you want to do, but I don't necessarily think it's difficult. Like, I didn't struggle. How was clinical during COVID? We were pulled from clinical when it hit and have recently been able to finally come back. I hadn't been to clinical since before spring break, so the second week in March, I think, was the last time I was at clinical. As some of you guys know, I was a student intern technologist, which means it's completely separate from my program. It wasn't affiliated with my school at all, but I worked at a facility where I was able to practice as an x-ray tech under the supervision of other x-ray techs. So I was always at work with another x-ray tech. I could never be alone. But my work, we had to wear masks for every single patient, as well as back in our department around each employee. And then we had to wear shields as well as all PPE with all rule outs. Yeah, it got to be a lot, and N95 masks are really painful. My heart goes out to anyone who has to wear those every single day at all times and doesn't have the proper PPE. Like, that's just awful. I got a question about my must-haves for the radiology program, and I've actually already done this video, so I will link it up in a card as well as in the description box. Did you feel prepared by the time you graduated? I personally did, because I've been working as an x-ray tech student for the last 9 months, so I've had so much additional experience. Like, I would work 24-hour weekends, and the amount of experience and the amount of things that I was able to get under my belt in that time frame was just so helpful for me. Like, I felt so prepared even by December. If you guys have the opportunity to work as like an intern technologist, it was a paid position for me. They just called it an intern because I legally couldn't work alone. So if you guys have the opportunity to work as that, I would recommend it so much. And then I got another question about the whole boards process. What was the process of you working without taking your boards? How does that work? And also, how did you time manage throughout the whole program? Did you study every day or once a week? So like I mentioned, I have a temporary license, which allows me to work while waiting to take my boards. Not all states have this, so you'll have to research it. And time management, it was hard, but you have to study when you have free time. Some days I feel like I was going nonstop and like I was just on autopilot, but I made it happen. How far in advance should I start studying for my boards? How many hours a day did you dedicate for studying for them? I'm a last semester senior student, and our date to take boards is unknown because we have been out of clinical since March. I would just recommend starting to study like maybe a couple months before you graduate, whether that's rad tech boot camp or getting like a set of flashcards. I think it's important to start studying as soon as you can. I think studying is such a hard thing to recommend because some people may be really good at things and they may not need to study very much, and some people may need to study a ton. So I personally set out about 2 to 3 hours a day. I'm down to the last month before I have to take my boards exam, so I've basically studied for 2 to 3 hours per day for the last week. And I also do have a video on the materials that I'm using to study for my boards, which I'll link up in a card and I'll link below. How long did it take you to finish the program? Like I mentioned earlier, it is a 21-month program, but your prerequisites will depend on how you take your classes. What first got you interested in radiology? Well, my mom's an ultrasound tech and my dad used to do MRI. They both started in x-ray. That's how they met, and now here I am. Do you have any advice on studying tips for understanding the skull anatomy and procedures? We are doing that now in my program, and I find it to be the most difficult thus far compared to all other body procedures and positions. For the skull, it's kind of interesting. I don't know. Skull positioning isn't too common around here because a lot of the times they'll just send them straight to CT. But RadTech Bootcamp has a really nice interactive module on how to position. They have a full video on the positioning lines and everything for each skull positioning, and then they also have interactive pictures, so you can click on each different landmark. The skull is hard for everyone. Someone asked, is it a master's degree program? No. No, I have an associate's in applied science, which is very, very, very far from a master's degree. There is no master's in radiography as an x-ray tech. X-ray techs don't get paid that much, guys. I don't think people realize that. So those are all the questions that I'm going to be answering for today's video. If I didn't answer your question, or if you have any other additional things after watching this that you're curious about, you can either message me over on Instagram or comment below in the comment section here. Please be nice to each other in the comment section. I feel like people can get so rude in the comment section for no reason. I don't know why, especially on these videos. Like the last video I posted, people were just like, stop it, just stop. So thank you guys so much for watching. Good luck with your program, and I will see you guys very soon in a new video.